Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. DR Congo's lost children, allegedly abducted and trafficked from home and put up for adoption in Belgium.
One day the kids were playing and a car arrived. Someone called out their names. Jacques went inside to get his shoes, and when he came back, the car had already left with the children.
50 years since the beginning of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, we ask if there are any lessons they can learn from South Africa's own peace journey to reconciliation. All aboard. After 3 years of suspension, a much-needed service resumes between Kinshasa and Kasangulu in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Also on the program, Surf's Up. In Nigeria, yes, that's right, Nigeria, we meet one of the country's most ambitious young surfers.
I decided to start surfing out of curiosity, actually. I'm going to be the #1 professional female surfer. That's how passionate I am about it.
And also in sport, not long to go before Liverpool faced Chelsea in the UEFA Super Cup in Istanbul. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. A court in Belgium is investigating an orphanage for allegedly abducting and trafficking children from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The children were brought to Belgium and adopted by families who had been told they were orphans. Years later, DNA tests have proved that in some cases they were not. It started in the village of Genema in 2015, where some families had sent their children to what they thought was a holiday camp in the capital, Kinshasa. The children never returned. 2 years later, the families that lost their children had an unexpected visit from 2 Belgian journalists who were investigating adoption fraud in their country. They believed the children were being abducted from remote parts of the DRC, transferred to an orphanage in the capital, and then into the arms of unsuspecting adoptive parents from Belgium. DNA checks matched children in Belgium with families in the DRC. The investigators eventually met the parents in the DRC and were able to record a message to take back to their children in Belgium. Here's a clip of one of them.
He was my favorite child. I love him so much. He is so intelligent, and I was counting so much on him. If I had the money and I lived in Kinshasa, my child would already be back here with his family. I did not sell him. Those who are saying these are wrong.
L'histoire est qu'un jour ils sont réveillés, ils jouaient à la maison et puis ils ont vu un véhicule.
One day the kids were playing and a car arrived. Someone called out their names and they had to go with the car. To Jacques they said, "You're not wearing your sandals. Go get them." Jacques went inside to get his shoes, and when he came back, the car had already left with the children.
Let's get more on this extraordinary story now and talk to Kurt Vertelaars, who uncovered this tale with his colleague Benoit Dofrien. Kurt, please explain to us how this story broke.
Well, a few years ago, through contacts, I got aware of this adoption fraud. I investigated for several months under the radar in Belgium about how this, who the people were that were involved. And after 4 months of investigation, I traveled to Congo, to Kinshasa, and later on to Gemena, and tracked down the biological parents of kids that were at that time in Belgium and being raised as orphans.
And do we know how many kids could have been abducted in this way?
Well, there is absolutely no idea of that. We know that the orphanage, or the people behind the orphanage, used Belgium for at least a few dozen of adoptions. Of course, they say that every adoption was a regular one, but we have discovered at least 5 adoptions, or at least 5 kids that still have biological parents alive who clearly are not orphans, but of course there must be many more, and that is what the federal prosecutor is investigating.
When I was reading some of your reports this morning, Kurt, I mean, some of the parents in Belgium, the adoptive parents, have brought their children forward and asked the authorities to investigate whether or not their parents are still alive. But then you wonder, why didn't the parents in the DRC raise an alarm when their children were not returned to them?
Well, some of them did, of course, but you have to be aware that the biological parents that we tracked down in Gemena, they did not have the means, of course, to have help, not even from police or not even from an attorney. They were left ignorant. They did not know what happened to their kids. The kid was gone missing in Kinshasa, and that's where the story ended. You know, of course, better than me, that between Kinshasa and Gemena, there's like 800 kilometers. There's no way for those poor parents to go there. That's one side of the story. The other one is there were also kids abducted in the capital of Kinshasa by a guy who was kidnapping the kids on demand. Those parents also went to some organizations in Kinshasa to get help, and the only thing the organizations could do was to make up a file of the kidnapping and a picture of the kid, and that was about it. Then it went to the police, but nobody ever tracked them down.
Okay, I mean, Kurt, very briefly, if you will, we're running out of time. Investigations are now underway in Belgium, but what about in the DRC?
Well, as far as I know, Belgium has been 3 times, or at least the federal prosecutor has been 3 times to the DRC in order to have the DNA matches, but also to question parents or people involved in the trafficking. And as far as I know, in Belgium there will be starting well, they're closing down the investigation, and the trial will be on its way. For the DRC, I don't know what will happen there. I'm pretty sure that government also will make a decision concerning an eventual trial.
Okay, Kurt Vertelaars, Belgian investigative journalist, speaking to us there live from Brussels. Thank you very much. Now let's take a quick look at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Militants have attacked a government army base in southern Somalia with car bombs and gunfire. The military said there were casualties on both sides but gave no figures. The Al-Shabaab Islamist group said it stormed the base in the town of Adegele, killing several dozen troops while losing 2 of its own fighters. There's no independent confirmation of the claim. The United Nations Refugee Agency is calling on European governments to urgently allow in more than 500 people who remain stranded at sea in the Mediterranean. The UNHCR says nearly 600 people have died or gone missing in waters between Libya and Italy this year. And Nigeria's president has ordered the country's central bank to stop funding for food imports. Instead, Mr. Buhari wants to focus on efforts on improving agricultural production in the country and attaining full food security. The president's order has led to questions over the bank's status as an independent body. Now, this week marks 50 years since the beginning of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. The conflict lasted decades and claimed thousands of lives. For different reasons, South Africa too lived through its own bloody divisions and, like Northern Ireland, went through its own journey of reconciliation. Our correspondent Pumza Fichlani has travelled from Johannesburg and gives this personal assessment of Northern Ireland's peace process.
It's home to a people haunted by the past, ghosts that simply will not let go. Like South Africa, Northern Ireland has an emotive connection to its violent history. For 30 years, this community was the scene of bloodshed. Thousands were killed in sectarian violence.
These gates are going to close soon for the night. It's to help the communities living on either side feel safer. But as a South African who lived under apartheid, I've come to find out why now, more than 20 years after the peace agreement, these divisions still exist here.
And blood red lines lie where you fell.
My father's name is Trevor Bracknell.
In the play Blood Red Lines, the cast members all have personal stories of the Troubles. In South Africa, there's a common narrative: apartheid was wrong.
Well, I was 7 the time my father was killed.
Ellen Bracknell, whose father was killed in a bombing over 40 years ago, says a common narrative doesn't exist here.
There is an ongoing debate as to the definition of a victim here at the minute. There are so many different narratives out there, but if we can get an understanding of how violence affected people, how people had to live through that violence, I think then we can start to get to a stage of acknowledging what we've done to each other.
But reaching an understanding is difficult while there are continuing divisions.
Growing up in South Africa, segregation was stark, but even I've never seen anything like this. This is one of many peace walls here in Belfast, keeping two communities separate.
Efforts at integration have not been enough. Communities remain polarized. A vast majority of schools in Northern Ireland are segregated. I visited 2 schools in Londonderry, one with many Protestant pupils and the other a Catholic school, separated by a river and identity.
So I'm South African. What do you identify as?
I would identify myself as Irish.
I identify as Irish.
I identify as Irish. I identify as Irish.
But in the school with Protestant pupils,
what do you identify as?
British.
British as well, yeah.
Why do you think it's still so separate?
It's like the fear of the unknown. We all live in different areas. Like there's not much integration of like communities.
What sort of future do you imagine?
More open and mixed and like more accepting of people, rather than it being us versus them.
I think it's definitely still influenced a lot by older generations, people especially who grow up, if they're in a family who are, you know, particularly one-sided.
I think there still is bitterness, as you said, from older generations, and that sometimes still trickle down. We were born after the peace agreement, so we don't really know the brunt of what happened. Well, we can read it in textbook, but that's never the same. The tensions don't have to be there.
So how do you overcome those tensions? For Professor Brendan Humber, it's about trust. He's worked on both South Africa's and Northern Ireland's post-conflict transitions.
If you think of South Africa, sometimes when people use the language of reconciliation, it implies a certain vision of the future that in and of itself can silence people as well. Reconciliation for me is a contested idea. It's not getting everybody together and saying we all agree on this great future. It's more that we agree to share the space.
2 societies of a similar history. The violence has diminished since the days of mass slaughter, but neither society has the luxury of forgetting about the past. I'm reminded that peace is a fragile thing. Pumza Fihlani, BBC News, Belfast.
Well, Pumza joins us now from Johannesburg to talk more about this story. Pumza, while we must stress that the causes of both crises were not exactly the same, we do know that several prominent South Africans played a major role in the Northern Ireland peace process.
That's right, Peter. And in fact, our current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was one of the people who were at the forefront of talks about transitioning into a peaceful society. But one of the things that we discovered in my visit in Northern Ireland was that there is still much work to be done, that unlike in South Africa, where we had processes that were endorsed by the government, such as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where the victim and perpetrator came face to face, such a process had not happened in Northern Ireland. And for the people there, when I spoke to them, this felt like a denial of even an acknowledgement of how much hurt had happened in the times of the Troubles.
And while you were out there in Northern Ireland, did you get the feeling, I mean, I heard it from some of the children there, that there needs to be a coming together of both sides. Did you get the feeling that everybody seems to be operating from the same page now?
Not entirely, Peter, actually. And I think that's the bit that I was, just on a personal level, that was difficult to walk away with, that you had 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds talking about us and them. That in the society and how it had been structured still in Northern Ireland, with having physical divisions such as the peace walls, such as places where you couldn't ordinarily just walk into, they had inherited the idea of being separate, that there wasn't much integration that was happening 50 years later within those communities, and young people particularly, even though they hadn't lived through the horror of the violence of the Troubles, had inherited this idea of mistrust firstly, but also that they were different, that they needed to hold on to a thing, and that if they let that go, that would mean losing themselves. And that was keeping largely young people who wanted to know more about Protestant communities, Catholic communities, from integrating and from getting to learn more about each other, about learning about the things they had in common more than the things that they had that separated them.
Pumza Fitlani there, live from Johannesburg. Thank you very much. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, Mimi with the sports. 4 more spots up for grab to reach the women's AfroBasket quarterfinals taking place in Senegal. Welcome back to Focus on Africa on BBC World News. A train service between Kinshasa and Kasangulu in Central Democratic Republic of Congo has been relaunched today after a 3-year suspension. The service had been closed due to poor railway maintenance and insecurity. The line is expected to ferry at least 8,000 people daily. The BBC's Gaius Kowene has more from Kinshasa.
The majority of passengers who arrived in Kinshasa this morning are ordinary citizens who live in the town of Kasangulu, that is 45 kilometers west of Kinshasa, and they work here in Kinshasa. Some of them are business people. They are doing informal business, trading agricultural products from Kasangulu to Kinshasa. Now, Kinshasa is one of the fastest growing cities in Africa with more than 12 million residents. So it's a big market for all these farmers from Kasangulu to come and have their products here. However, the railroad company still has to face infrastructure problems due to very old and decaying infrastructures like these trains. Most of its trains are on the ground because they are broken down and cannot be used. So right now it's trying to fundraise and seek investors who will help it bring back to life the trade life in Kinshasa. Now, this train that has been launched from Kinshasa to Kasangulu was suspended for 3 years, and now it will be able to help at least 8,000 people move between the two cities daily. Gaius Kowene, BBC News, Kinshasa.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. It's now time for some sports. Mimi?
Thank you very much, Peter. Now, kicking off in just over an hour's time, the UEFA Super Cup, where the Champions League winners Liverpool will be taking on the Europa League winners Chelsea in Istanbul. For Liverpool, the fixture in the Turkish city brings memories of when they won their 5th Champions League trophy there back in 2005. But for Senegal, Sadio Mane, he's had a pretty busy summer making it to the Africa Cup of Nations final, but he's not letting the tiredness get in the way.
Yes, I think I'm ready. And tiredness, I think, is here. So for sure, I've been playing professional football a long time. I think I never even have holidays now, 7 years, more than 20 days. So I'm used to it. And for sure, I'm ready, I'm here. So let's do it.
Still staying with football, Ghanaian Selas Tete has been appointed as the head coach of Sierra Leone for the 2nd time by the country's Football Association. The 62-year-old who won the 2009 Under-20 World Cup with Ghana has filled the vacant position previously occupied by local coach John Kister. His appointment hasn't been recognized by the country's sports ministry, who pay the wages of national coaches. It claims the selection process did not come to a logical conclusion and was incomplete. To some transfer news, Algeria defender Rami Bensebani has joined German Bundesliga club Borussia Mönchengladbach from French side Stade Rennes on a 4-year deal. And Nigeria international defender Kenneth Omeruo has rejoined Spanish club Leganés on a permanent deal from English Premier League side Chelsea. The 25-year-old's 31 appearances for the La Liga club last season came in his 7th loan move away from Chelsea, who had been his parent club for 7 years. Now, only 4 spots remaining for the AfroBasket women quarterfinals on Tuesday. Mali, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Senegal booked their spots today. Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo have also gone through. Who will join them? Cameroon and Egypt are currently playing. And later, there's a matchup between Côte d'Ivoire and Tunisia. Ahead of Côte d'Ivoire's game today, we caught up with their coach about their chances.
From this competition, I'm trying to get qualified for the Olympics. That's what I'm trying to get. If I can be between the 6 first teams, that would be great for me. Because I know I have a team that don't have a lot of experience. And so we're trying to learn from the other big teams and then go ahead. That's what we're trying to do.
As a team, we're hoping to have the trophy, but I'm not going to be pretentious now. We're going to take it game by game and hopefully get to the final and get the trophy at the end of the competition.
Now, double Olympic champion Caster Semenya has said that she hasn't felt supported by other women in sport. Semenya will not defend her 800 meters title at the World Championships in September after the Swiss Federal Tribunal reversed a ruling that temporarily lifted testosterone regulations imposed on her. The South African athlete was speaking during a women's conference in Johannesburg, where she said male athletes don't come under the same classification.
In men, you don't categorize anything. You don't say this man has got the high testosterone or the masculine, they have long legs, they have this bold physique. You don't say that. You get what I'm saying? You just say this athlete is phenomenal. It's the greatest, we have ever seen in the world. But then come a female.
Caster Semenya. That's all the sport. Back to you, Peter.
Many thanks, Mimi. Thank you very much. Now, let's stay with that sporting theme. And surfing might not be the most popular sport in Nigeria, despite the long coastline that it enjoys. But some surfers are trying to change that. Meet Rachel Ola. She says her ambition is to become the best female surfer in the world.
Surfing has taught me to be very courageous and to be very consistent. I decided to start surfing out of curiosity, actually. Surfing sort of challenged me. And I love anything that tests me mentally and physically. So I think that's one of the reasons why I love surfing. Yeah, because the water always tests you every time. If you're someone that is scared a lot, you won't be able to get into the water to even paddle, let enough stand on the board. So you have to have that, courage to be, to just do it. I would love surfing to be more popular because aside from it being like a very good way of keeping fit, it's also a fun thing to do. I feel like it's also a mental exercise because you work with your body and your mind, and your all senses has to be open. Surfing is not even popular. So we can't get boards in Nigeria, we can't get things, we can't get leashes. So that's one of the challenges, because I had to order my board all the way from South Africa. All around the world, you see like really good female surfers and they're surfing the waves and they're really strong. But I know Nigeria is going to produce one very soon because we're smart like that. I'm going to be the #1 professional female surfer. That's how passionate I am about it.
Well, she's much braver than I am. That's it on Focus on Africa for today. From me, Peter Okwoche. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.